Welcome to Locked In Basketball, your source for everything basketball. My name is Nick DeFeo, alongside my co-host Jason Shea. We dive into all things hoops, from recruiting tips and training advice to hot takes and the latest news. Whether you're a player, coach, parent, or fan, we've got you covered. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more great content every week. Time to get locked in. Locked In Basketball on YouTube, Facebook, Locked In_basketball on X. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's dark out at 5 o'clock. It's getting cold, so it feels more and more like basketball season every day.
We are approaching the season, which we just talked about. Both obviously excited for, but big season coming up for you guys. So I'm sure you're ready to go here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we've seen enough of each other in open gyms and workouts and everything else. So I think everyone in the program, coaches and players, I think across the country, all the teams are feeling the same way. A lot of excitement, and we're all absolutely ready to go.
Yeah, you feel that itch. You know, you get the couple of weekends on, or the last weekend of college basketball just getting tipped off on TV. You had the primetime games on Tuesday night with Kentucky and Duke, and what a great game that was. But you can start to see it a little bit more, and you get ready for it. It's like, all right, now it's time, get into the season. And what a perfect segue into our episode tonight, which is tryout preparation. November 15th is the typical day for most schools and, most states across the country to get started with their basketball season.
Not in our state, Nick. Not in our state.
Yeah, not in ours. We're
December 5th.
We're a little later, December 5th.
The last state in the union to get started, so we've got the longest wait here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And I had to play through that. Obviously, it was always actually the Monday after Thanksgiving, what it used to be. But
yep.
Now they bumped up the football playoffs, so now we're December 5th, which is awful.
That's a whole nother episode.
Oh.
Just kind of getting away.
State association.
Well, I think we'll put this out as a preview for another episode, but the idea of the multi-sport athlete, I completely understand it. I appreciate it. I know that if you play more sports as a young athlete, develops your muscles and everything else better, and you become a better athlete. But the reality now with high school sports is very simple. It's so difficult to be a multi-sport athlete and be successful. And our rules are built around multi-sport athletes and our calendar dates. And even those sometimes, depending on the state, can kind of be messed up. It's a whole nother conversation, but we deal with it here, where football runs, if you make the championship game, full 2 weeks into the season, and a basketball player would have a day maybe to get ready to play a basketball game. And that if you're a serious basketball player, how can you possibly participate in football, knowing that that's a possibility? But we'll talk about that. Today's about tryouts, and we're getting started. So that's a very interesting topic, I think, for parents and for athletes. How do you prepare for your tryouts? What should parents expect in preparing their children for an experience that is a little bit different than if they were in middle school, for example?
Yeah, we're going to dive into a few different things that players should be aware of, that parents should be aware of. They'll obviously get the coach's perspective from you, which is exciting, and then we'll kind of just go from there and see what where the episode brings us. And we could start as a freshman in high school, where new school, obviously, they're getting prepared. They've had the first quarter under their belt. Maybe they played a fall season, maybe they didn't, but they're preparing now for the basketball season. And here we are, about 2 weeks away, 3 weeks from tonight, actually. From that first tryout for a freshman, and what, in your opinion, should we expect for a freshman, or if you put yourself in a freshman's shoes? And your son's obviously a freshman and going into his freshman year, which is exciting for him. But him and his boys, and what are they expecting for tryouts, and where should they prepare?
What are they expecting? I think that's that's hard for me to answer. I try to relate back, and you probably can too, to tryouts when we went through it. I think that the first thing as a coach I think about is I do try to put myself in their shoes. This is the first time where they're getting ready to do something where they may actually not make the team for most players. Most players. I'm not saying that AAU doesn't make cuts, but they don't. If you don't make the A team, you make the B team. If you don't make the B team, you find a C team. You'll find somewhere to play probably. And middle school, it's the same thing. So I think the first obstacle is just for those guys to relax knowing the possibility that they may not make it, and prepare themselves the best they can. Start out with just being in great shape. Find some time to go and get in the court and just sprint, run a lot. Hopefully they're playing enough. Freshmen sometimes miss those opportunities, but they've got to run. They've got to come in shape so that at least when they get into the first practice or tryout, the last thing they want to be worried about is inability to get up and down the court.
Yeah, that's more or less half the battle. Getting up and down the court is looking the part, and obviously a lot of the freshmen that are getting into these gyms and going to tryouts, and they see that they're sophomores, juniors, seniors, maybe the kids that they've been watching play for the last couple of years they're now on the same court with them, and it's a little anxiety ridden and overwhelming. But being in shape is something that they can control, that hopefully they've either played a fall sport or have been doing the conditionings with the team in the fall, and that's something that more or less you can do at any point where you can prepare yourself and say, hey, I may not be the best skilled, or maybe I have an off day with my shot or my ball handling, but I'm going to run up and down the court. I'm going to be prepared and kind of bust my ass and really play defense, play hard. I think the defensive end of the floor is where some kids can really flourish because they are in good shape, or they may not be the best ball handler or shooter, but they can actually defend and guard a ball screen, or get a rebound and kind of push the ball to the floor, and maybe start getting into some communication stuff, and that's where they can kind of stand out.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. That's a great point. Stand out in all the right ways. And I'll even take it back one more step. Parents, have your forms in on time. Make sure your physical is up to date. The requirements that are there when you're getting ready to try out. It seems so silly and simple, but it's not. And I've had so many guys who try out and then they show up day one. They're already nervous. They're running on the court. They're excited. We're calling attendance. You didn't call my name. You didn't sign up. Your parents didn't fill out the form. You don't have an updated physical. You can't try out today. And we try out it butts right up to the weekend. The school nurse is gone. And now there's this kid who, okay, most coaches are going to make an exception, especially for a freshman. We're going to let him try out. But you're really not making a great first impression. It's not usually the kid's fault. But at the same time, as a coach, you want to get started with your regular practices, and now you have this player who's still technically a tryout player, not ready to go. So that's one, fill out all the forms. Two, be a great listener in tryouts. You're going to have a different level of intensity at most schools for that tryout. You're going to have whistles blowing. You're going to have multiple coaches in the gym. They're going to be shouting instructions, get to this line, 2 balls in that line, and they're going to quickly explain whatever drills they want you to do. You really need to just pay attention. If you're not positive, don't jump in the front of the line. You don't want to, you don't need to be that anxious. You're going to get your opportunity. Make sure you know what's going on. Listen so that you don't stand out for the wrong reason. Coaches want to see that a player can listen and pay attention. It's a very underrated, I think, skill set, and it stands out in a tryout setting.
Something that you can easily do, and going back to your first point, I'll never forget my freshman year of high school, sophomore, junior, senior year, not my freshman, sophomore year of college, my junior and senior year of college. Every first tryout, we had kids who were on the team and should have been a varsity player or a good basketball player sitting and watching from day one because they didn't have their forms in. I'll never forget it. Every single year. It never fails. Never fails. Someone, some way, didn't hand their forms in and can't try out either day one or day two. And like you said, it butts up to the weekend, so that stinks. But listening is an underrated and skill. I'll put an emphasis on the skill because most kids are going to be eager to jump in the front and showcase that, hey, I'm ready. You know what I mean? But they first one in the drill and they screw it up. And then the coach is even more irate and we're screaming and we're sending guys to the line to make sure, we're going to run because we did it wrong. Where if you had just listened and put 2 basketballs in that line instead of 4, you would have been just fine. But it is a great point, especially for freshmen, especially in a new place, a new gym, a new school, a new coach. Make sure you understand what's going on. If you don't know, you can always ask. And I think most kids are going to be afraid to ask because they are freshmen. They don't want to seem like the kid who doesn't know anything. But if you just ask the question either to the coach, pull him aside, or ask one of the teammates right there who has been there before and say, hey, I'm going to hang back. Can you show me what the drill looks like?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And then I think too, don't get outside yourself in tryouts. Don't try to do things you're not capable of doing or you haven't done before. Tryouts are tough though, because you do get players out there. It's not a coached environment. It's a coached environment, but what I mean is the system's not in, you're not installed. It's not a typical practice plan, most likely. So you're dealing with kids who are coming out there and they're trying to prove themselves. So it becomes more like a pickup environment. And that sometimes favors the guys who take the most shots, that definitely favors the point guards. The bigs really will struggle to get the ball in these situations. So if you're a big, what can you do? Engage in ball screens with the player who has the ball a lot. Force the defense to make a decision, and then that's going to force you into the action. Grab offensive rebounds as often as possible. Box out. If you're a guard and you're off the ball and you're more of a shooter, you're probably in the toughest spot in a tryout or a pickup game most of the time because you're a little bit more dependent. But again, stand out for those other things. You mentioned it earlier. Hustling, playing great defense, taking a charge, offensive rebounding. Most good coaches are going to have drills in place to watch kids shoot. So they're going to get a sense if that player can shoot or not, whether or not the ball goes in. I could watch a guy take 10 shots. I'm pretty sure if he's a good or not so good shooter, right? That the guys don't, you don't need to see a player shoot the ball a bunch. But stay within yourself and then understand it is a tryout. Don't get nervous or frustrated if you're not touching the ball. You're going to have opportunities, but make opportunities to stand out in other ways.
That was going to be my next question for you. What if you're a player who's trying out, and maybe you're a good player, maybe you're just trying to prove your worth on the court, and there's another kid who is taking every shot on every single possession. What would you tell a freshman that's trying out who is either not getting the ball enough or just watching this other player get 15, 20 shots?
That's a tough one, because what would I say as a player might be different than what somebody else might say as a player. There are some guys who are more outgoing and more willing to put themselves out there, and there's other guys who are quiet. If I'm on the court with that player, and even as a freshman, looking back in my high school career so long ago, I would certainly have at least said something to that player when you have a timeout, when you have a break. Hey, we need an opportunity here. Let's move it around a little bit. I would find that opportunity to talk to him about it. But it's very challenging. Now, so again, how many times are you going to get steals on defense? Maybe not that many, but you really just need to stand out in other ways. Look for opportunities to get on a different group if you can. Most of the time you have multiple tryout days. Without being annoying, maybe mention to the coach, can I try to, grab some minutes on that with that group tomorrow? Or with that player, whatever. Just make a little bit of a note. The good thing is most coaches are going to see that. And hopefully you have a coach who's calming that other player down who's taking too many shots. Like, hey, John, you're going to make the team, man. Like, let's see if somebody else can make a shot today. Right. That's what I would say to the player. I'm not going to yell at a kid, but I'm just going to try to encourage them in a positive way. Let's let some other guys get an opportunity.
Right, and that's what I think, looking back to when I was a freshman in high school, which is getting up there now. I think, I don't know if I would have said anything specifically to the kid in the moment, but I would have known to try to stand out in other ways, like you said. I would have been encouraging on my team, maybe give the kid who's taking all the shots maybe a couple high fives and say, hey, take the next one or take the next good one. Or, hey, you had so-and-so open on the wing, make sure you see him next time. But I definitely would have been sprinting my ass up and down the court. I would have been, working hard on defense, trying to get every rebound just to try to spruce it up a little bit. Yes, I am well aware, and I was always well aware as a player that yes, this kid's taking too many shots. But one, I'm not going to knock him, and I'm not going to talk junk in a tryout because it's not going to come across well. But two, I'm just going to try to encourage him and say, hey, tough shot, but let's make sure we move the ball. Let's try to get it inside, or let's try to get a little better one because we're ultimately trying to win here. Whether it's a tryout, whether it's a game, everyone wants to win because winning makes everybody look good. So we want to make sure we're moving that basketball. So, going along with maybe some other pitfalls, what about a parent who can't watch their son try out? What would you say to parents who can't watch their son and is just going to get the information back through them? How do they handle tryouts for either themselves or their kid?
Who knows what the program you're trying out for does? I know in our program, parents are not allowed in the gym, not for tryouts and not for practices. I think that is probably more the norm for most schools. I don't think most schools are allowing parents in their tryouts. If they are, I think they shouldn't be. It's too sensitive an environment, and at the high school level, you need to get away from that. It's no longer the town travel team. The advice for parents is just to be encouraging and positive. Don't add pressure. You're going to ask how it went. Your son is going to have really just his viewpoint, his point of view of how it went. So he's not going to have what a coach has in terms of what they think or how it went, but just be as positive as you can with your son or daughter throughout tryouts, preparing them for whatever is coming. A lot of parents will have a sense, some won't, on where their son or daughter stands in making the team. Just be positive and understand that the team has coaches, hopefully multiple coaches, who are doing their best to evaluate a lot of players depending on the program, and that this is a different level. And you got to be prepared to deal with failure if that comes, or success if that comes, But yeah, you can't get in the gym. And even if they allow you in the gym, don't show up and go to the gym. I think that's the worst thing you could do for your child at a tryout. If they allow you in the gym, stay home. You're not helping them.
Yeah, it's just going to add unsurmountable pressure onto your kid's shoulders and say, hey, not only do I have a big day today for tryouts, but also my parent is sitting there watching me. And if I do something wrong, then maybe I get critiqued on the way home in the car, which is the worst place you can do that. And as a parent, I think whether you obviously see your kid try out, which I don't assume you would, but
I will.
You will. Well, that's a different story. Which is lucky for you. But most parents are not going. Most parents are not going to. So when they do get in the car, encourage them, ask them how it went, but also, understand that tryouts are going to last 2 to 3 days. Maybe it goes 4 days over the weekend. Encourage them to say, hey, I'm glad you had a good day today, but let's get ready for tomorrow. Let's get your homework done and let's get some good sleep so we can prepare for tomorrow. Or if your son or daughter comes home and says, they didn't play that well, it's, all right, you're good enough. We trust you and let's get ready for tomorrow and the next couple of days so that you can show what your capabilities are. And I've had these conversations a lot with parents as we get into October, November, and kids who are trying out. And I've had a couple of kids who I train who didn't make their town travel teams last year and did make the team this year, and which is a cool feeling. But just encouraging them to say the right things, and not to put their kid down as a 6th grader or 7th grader or 8th grader. And I try to tell parents, like, the development process doesn't happen until ultimately high school or later in the high school year. So stay patient and just encourage them to like the sport. And that's something that's maybe gone by the wayside, in today's day and age. But, as we do get into high school, it's still kids who are 14, 15 years old still need that encouragement, to continue to play harder, to continue to play better, but also when they're done, love them, get the homework done, let's get some sleep or let's spend some quality time together, and then let's move on to the next day, because there's nothing better you can do.
No, and it's not the end all be all. Right. It might feel like it at the time, but it's not. So you do have to prepare your child for that, and positivity goes a long way, and that's not softness. I think that sometimes positivity is confused with softness, just saying it's okay. Well, you're definitely not going to help your son if he comes home and didn't make it or didn't have a good session by getting on him or her. You're not going to help them by calling the coach. So some parent tips: make sure your kid is there on time. Make sure they're there on time. We talked about the forms. Get them there on time. Make sure they have their sneakers. Help them out. Help them pack their equipment. Help them get that stuff ready. So especially early, those first few days when they're nervous, they don't have a locker yet because it's not assigned at this point. Don't talk to the coach if you're a parent early on. It's very simple. Sneakers, shorts, t-shirt. Show up 20 minutes early of the tryout time. Be ready to go. That's it. Be there for pickup time. That's all you really need. right? Don't be over involved early on. It's also a little bit of a red flag for coaches when they see that. If you're asking a million questions, even though information was emailed out and maybe you're not paying attention, well, all of a sudden as a coach, you're saying, oh man, if this kid's a fringe kid, I'm going to go with the other fringe kid because I'm not going to deal with these potential headaches right there, so.
Right. And don't order any custom gear before the tryouts.
No, you can still be a super fan, man. Like, it's all good if you want to order some gear. There's so much tryouts. From the coach's perspective, which I didn't think we were really going to go into. I know you've gone through it. Although I guess as a coach, being a prep school coach, you recruited your kids, so not so much that you've gone through tryouts. So you've had to make tough decisions with kids. I know that from being around you. Even in our program, you had to make tough decisions with whether it was removing a kid or suspending kids. So you've dealt with the kids who are disappointed. And certainly with playing time, you dealt with kids who are disappointed. But you haven't been through the cut process. And that's the worst thing. And I think it's hard to convey because a parent is so focused on their kid's happiness, which is so understandable, that when their child does not make a team, and a lot of times it's for the first time, and they come home and they're devastated. They lose a lot of confidence. This is all real stuff. And then as a parent, your instincts are protect them, obviously comfort them, but then on the outside, when you're not in front of them, anger, frustration with the coaches. They're the ones who did this to your child. And I understand that emotion. That's a real emotion. And it's hard when you have those conversations with parents to just say, look, it's not a personal thing. I do understand, but you only have so many spots. It's such a challenge to do that. And it's the worst part of being a coach is making cuts.
Yeah, I haven't been part of that process yet, a little bit with the AAU side of things. But with my day job, I definitely get a ton of it. Being the dean of students at a high school is interesting in terms of what the parent reaction is, but I can only imagine that it's very similar to a parent and their son or daughter getting cut from a sports team where they've played that sport since I was 6 or 7 years old. How could my son or daughter be that bad where they can't make a spot? But let's say a son or daughter comes home. What parent tip would you give to? I guess it's along the same lines that we just talked about, but a kid who doesn't make it. As a parent, are you obviously you're frustrated, but is it immediate encouragement to stick with it? Is it all right? Let's move on to the next sport. The next season or the next thing that you love. What's your perspective on that, and what parents should do if their child gets cut?
Well, let's start out with, I'm so happy that you're joining the staff, and I think that this is the perfect time for you to work on your experience, and I'm looking forward to seeing you handle all the cut conversations this year. Yeah. No, you're yeah. What would I say to the parents? You should have an idea of, as a parent, hopefully you have an idea of your son or daughter's level. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. The more I think about it, I don't actually.
I would say most don't.
I think most don't. Yeah.
I would say most
so it is worth, maybe at that point the coach has given some feedback to your child. I don't think it's out of the realm of being a reasonable parent to send an email. And how do you send that email to a coach? You send it in a way that you acknowledge, I'm sure you have a lot of really great players trying out. Of course, we're disappointed for our son that didn't make it. I would just love some feedback on, do you think there's a possibility in the future, if he were to work on it, that there's a future path for him at your school, maybe another school, whatever it is, but just, can you give me some feedback? Because the answer might be, I don't see a pathway, if the coach is being honest. There are a lot of kids who do try out for, our team sometimes, and, they're not close. And they're coming from a school so I've had guys try out, and they're starting, they're beginning, and that's not their fault, and that's not the parents' fault. They're just like, we want to try out basketball because they see it on the list. Not every parent is in tune to everything that goes on in the sporting world. It's not their fault, but at that moment, it should become pretty obvious. And if your parent asks for that feedback in a respectful way, And I think most coaches will give it. And then you're able to guide your son or daughter to say, hey, why don't you try this sport or that sport? And have seen so many players who've gotten cut and gone on to be all-state athletes in other sports. They were really good athletes, just not very skilled. So don't bang your head against the wall if it's not really a possibility. If you're a good player trying for a good program, if you just had a really bad tryout, there are occasions where you don't make the team and there's so much improvement that you come back and you're able to make the team in subsequent years. That it is possible, but it's very challenging. Everybody says the Michael Jordan story. I'm watching Ted Lasso again for like the third time, and it's funny when they just kind of go over the reality of that example. Michael Jordan got cut as a freshman. Michael Jordan got cut, or was it a sophomore, from the varsity team. He played JV. Like, that was so normal at the time. And then he ended up growing a bunch, and he was like an All-American in 1 year. So that's not to say it's impossible if you get cut. It's just going to be more challenging because you're missing a year now and you're falling further behind.
Yeah, I think just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, I think asking for feedback, and not only as a parent, but even a player, asking for feedback is one of the most powerful things that you can do, although at sometimes it's going to be humbling. But asking for feedback is going to be substantial for future growth. And the reason is because you're going to get the response from somebody who's been invested for their career and what they do for their career, or a part-time job, but somebody who's going to really be invested in that sport and going to give you the truth. For the most part, give you the truth. I would hope most coaches would give the truth, but it's going to be something where you can digest that information over the course of either the next 2, 3, 4 days, or maybe the next week, and say, hey, is this something that I really want to do? Can I take this feedback and run with it and kind of push myself to get to the next level or get to tryouts next year and make the team? Or is it something that say, hey, I understand it. It's not something I want to put my work into, and then I'm just going to move on and move on to the next sport or whatever they do in the side.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note to everybody and just remind everybody, every player eventually hits a wall that they're probably not going to break through. I shouldn't say every player. 99.9% of players are going to hit that point where their careers are not going to move on. Some hit it earlier than others. It could be that town travel team. It could be the freshman high school team, the junior varsity high school team, the varsity team not being able to play in college, not making the pros. At some point, you're going to not make an all-star team. Now we're going crazy here, but not making an Olympic team. Yep. At some point, every player probably does, with the exception of such a few.
The elitists, right?
The elite of the elite. So you're going to hit that point. Do you love the game or do you not love the game? If you love the game and that you're so passionate about it, then you're going to find a way or an avenue to be involved in the game. So if you don't make the team, most coaches are really excited to bring on a team manager who could be a part of the team and an integral part of the team. You look at the college game, many of those team managers end up being successful coaches. Many of them launched successful head coaching careers, and they began as team managers at the college level. I've had guys at the high school level be team managers for me and go on to be team managers at the college level. They've actually turned it into something that's been long-term. That's one way. All the content creation, we're doing it right now. There's so many opportunities to get involved in content creation with basketball if you love the game, or maybe it's broadcasting. You talk to your local high school, most of the high schools are streaming games. The majority of them do not broadcast, and if you are interested in basketball, you could start maybe a career, a hobby, an interest, and get involved. There's so many ways. And then, of course, you could play intramural basketball at a lot of schools where you're still able to play, or club level or AAU. Just because you don't make that freshman team or JV or varsity team does not mean basketball has been taken away from you. It just may have opened up an opportunity or a pathway to experience basketball in a way that's more appropriate for you at that stage of your career.
Yeah, that's great stuff. And most college managers are managers that move on to try to make it a career. We talked to Sam Ferry early on. Sam was a manager, but former high school player who ended up being a manager and then a coach. He realized that. We talked to Mustafa Haran on the last episode, and he said that he was just motivated by not being selected for McDonald's All-American. That's the elite side of things and the highest level side of things. So It's a great point. Not being a player doesn't mean it's going to open up different avenues for you, and that's something that is powerful for a lot of kids to hear and a lot of parents to hear. I think it's just because your son or daughter is not the best player on the court, it doesn't mean they can't be a broadcaster or a podcaster or write a newsletter, for a local team or a local high school, or kind of create their own way that way. So it's pretty cool.
I think too, the other part of it is, screw the coach. I'm going to get better. He made a mistake. She made a mistake. That happens. I know you've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. I've had kids I almost cut this close to cutting, and one comes to mind, Andrew Lazar. I don't say we were close to cutting him, but maybe we were at one point his freshman to sophomore year, just didn't really see it. And God, we were so wrong. That kid ended up being what would have been an all-state player. It was COVID year and everything else, so shortened seasons, and didn't really get that opportunity, but ended up playing at the college level and as a starter and playing the Final Four. That kid can continue to work hard, made the team. We didn't make we would have been a travesty if we made that mistake, but we almost did. I do remember, just comparing him, he was a little bit slower developing, and then all of a sudden, we're like, wow, he's so athletic, and he's a winner. That was probably the most impressive thing about him. But coaches can be wrong, so you can prove a coach wrong. We've had guys that have gone from the bottom, close to being cut, to top. I've had guys who were cut, who came back, and were absolutely impact players. Nick, you talked about it before we got on today. You were cut 2 years at the college level, and that's even harder to give people a perspective. And we're not going to spend too much time on college, but college is hard because coaches recruit, and walk-ons are an afterthought and sometimes a pain in the butt, especially if they're good, because then they're going to take spots away from the kids they recruited. You did that. Talk about that a little bit and your experience, because you went through cuts.
Yeah, we went through it. So my senior year of high school, I played soccer, basketball, volleyball in the spring. Our volleyball team was very good. We were good all through high school. We had lost actually three straight state championships to Staples High School in Westport going into our senior year. So pretty cool story. But anyway, we had a great basketball season. I had a couple schools recruiting me outside of the state in my senior year. And I was kind of putting it on hold because I knew volleyball season was coming and I was a good player. So ended up going through the volleyball season. We ended up losing, I think, one game, but we ended up meeting Staples in the state championship for the fourth straight year. And we beat them, which was pretty awesome. So
thank God.
Yeah, thank God. We ended up beating them, which was basically the end of my high school career. I ended up winning the state championship for volleyball. But I held off because I knew I was going to get some interest for volleyball for college. So I actually was getting recruited to play volleyball. Myself, a teammate of mine, and another kid that we played with from another school. So we ended up getting recruited. So I kind of put the basketball thing on hold for a little bit. Ended up being interested in volleyball, and all three of us actually chose to go to a school together for volleyball. Middle of the summer, I'll never forget it, we were on our family vacation. It was, I think, the middle of June or end of June, or maybe it was July, a month ago pretty much, left in the summer before college, and the two kids backed out on me. And they said, we're not going to go to the school, we're not going to play volleyball. So I actually had to scramble. It was I think it actually was the end of July, so I had to scramble. Anyway, Western New England University, or college at the time, was my number one. That's where I wanted to go, just for school in general. I love the campus. So I ended up going back, committing to Western New England, no sports, for nothing. So I was just gonna be a student, whatever. Ended up reaching out to the coach a couple times in the summer just to see what the interest level would be, and minimal response. I wasn't a kid who was recruited, so it was a minimal response. So I was like, whatever, screw it. So freshman year, go through it. It's like late fall. Not sure if I'm going to try out or not. Ended up not trying out my freshman year. So I went through it, kind of just enjoyed my freshman year of college, and then moved on. Sophomore year, I get to this, right around this time, maybe a couple of weeks prior, it's like late October, and I ended up not trying out again. So I was like, you know what, I want to, but maybe I'll just hold off. So I think it was the middle of the season, my sophomore year, I was actually at a game. My wife was on the dance team, not my wife at the time, but I was there for her, but I was also there for the game. So watching the game, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. I can play. I can play with these guys. So it was probably January or February at that point, and my mind was just like, I know I can play with these dudes. Like, just give me an off season. Let me get myself back into shape, and I can actually make the team. I know I can do it. So we get through that basketball season, that spring, that summer, and then that fall. I'll get to the fall in a second, but that spring and summer, I bust my ass, play hard, get in the gym, playing pickup, working out with a couple of buddies of mine who I worked out with and played AU with in high school, who ended up going Division I, and played at Sacred Heart. So I was working out with them all summer. That was great. And then I get to the fall. The first thing I do was find out who the captains are going to be for that year. And I found the two kids. One of them I actually knew pretty well, just from being in school with them for the previous 2 years. But I sought them out, got their phone numbers, and immediately made sure that they put me on all text messages, all group messages that I was going to, or that they were going to have for the team. And it was super awkward because they have the team in college, like you have the team, right? So they put me on the group. Like, they had no problem with doing that because they knew I was a decent player, but they didn't really know what to expect from me. So they put me on all the conditionings, on all the group things, on all the weekends. They text in the group chat, and I'm making sure I'm a part of that. I go to play pickup with them, and after a couple times, I start to get comfortable. I start to get really comfortable. And during the fall, I am also meeting with the coaches, introduce myself. My name is DeFeo. This is where I'm from. This is what my high school career looked like. I'm going to try out for your team. And most coaches are just like, yeah, nice to meet you. Looking forward to seeing you play, whatever. But I did it a couple times. And our college coach was actually the athletic director of the school as well. So I made my way into his office multiple times that fall. But again, busted my ass, made sure I was trying to come in first in like all the conditionings, all the sprints. We had to run the mile, the weightlifting. I was trying to be the best at everything. Was I? No, because the other guys were still good, and we had some good players on that team. But I busted my ass, and I wanted to mentally make myself feel like I was going to be, the best player on the team, and the conditioning, whatever. Ended up trying out. It was like a 3-day tryout, and the majority of it was running, actually. Ended up making the team, which was great. Accomplished the goal. But then from there, it was like, all right, now what do I want to do with this? I made the team. I proved it. We were okay. It was my junior year. We weren't that great. Like, I think we won 6 or 7 games, which is not ideal. But we, as at that point, I had accomplished the goal. I had made the team, and now I reverted back to what I saw my sophomore year. Is like, I can play with these guys. It was like, all right, I see the starting guard, I see the starting shooting guard. Like, I think I'm better than these guys. And it was like our 3rd game of the year. It was against Springfield College, huge rival for Western New England. And I think one of our guards got into foul trouble, and then the second guard off the bench got into some foul trouble too. So I ended up getting in. I think I hit a shot. I made an and one, and just kind of like chipped away at it from that point, and ended up being captain my senior year, captain my 5th year. And we ended up having a decent team, not great, but a decent team. And I ended up having a great career, and I think I scored over like 600 points in college. But all because just because I didn't play my freshman or sophomore year doesn't mean I was discouraged by that. It only kind of motivated me especially once I saw the kids play and just understood, like, hey, I could play with these guys. I was a good high school player, but I'm cut from the cloth where it's like I'm going to really motivate myself, and I'm going to push myself. And kind of like Mustafa we talked about last week, like, he was slighted a little bit, but he's pissed off, and he's going to really work towards it. It was something similar for me. I was kind of mad that I wanted to try out my freshman or sophomore year, because I know I could have made the team then and had a full career, probably could have scored 1,000 points, which would have been awesome. But seeing those guys play my sophomore year and being like, I know I can play with those guys, it was automatic for me that I was trying out the next year, and eventually ended up making the team and having a good college career. So it was
that sounds
cool.
like a great college career, and it's a great lesson too for, I think, not just guys aspiring to play in college. It's a college story, but it's also a story that applies to high school. And my high school coach and mentor, who I also coached with, always had a great analogy. Success is where opportunity meets preparation in the road, right? And I thought that was always a great analogy. The key to that analogy, though, is to take it a step further and understand that you don't know when the intersection is going to take place. You don't know how far you have to drive with your work before opportunity intersects and you have you have that chance for success. You don't know when it's happening. So you've got to continue to prepare. You're preparing and practice. You make the team. You prepare to get on the team. You make the team. Now you could take it at that point and say, I'm there, and I'm very satisfied that I made the team after not playing college basketball and not playing high school for almost 3 years since your career had ended at the high school level. But instead, you continue to work and you continue to strive. And we're not going to go into the college recruiting landscape, but again, it's so hard for a walk-on to elevate past guys who have been recruited. You have to have a great mindset. You have to have consistency in your work ethic. And not only did you have it, then you get that opportunity and you're successful and you end up scoring 600 points. That's the best case scenario, obviously, but it's still a great lesson for kids that you're going to get into these seasons. Now, what do you do after you make the team? What are your goals now? Did you barely make it? Look around, be honest with your assessment. We've talked about this in a different episode. Assess yourself. Have conversations with your coaches weekly. Where do I stand? What do I need to do? How do I improve? I had a player today ask me that. Kid has worked so hard. He's probably the most improved player. And, it's hard to be specific all the time as a coach, but he's doing the right thing. He'll certainly, I hope, be ready when his opportunity comes. But just find out now where you want to go once you make the team. I think that's the lesson. Continue to pursue, and move forward on it until you hit the wall. Again, some point you're going to hit a spot where somebody's just a little better than you on that team, and that's okay. You still have a love for the game, but while you're in it, keep pursuing whatever that next opportunity is.
Yeah, and it happens at every level, whether it's the NBA, whether it's college basketball. I mean, Cooper Flagg's probably one of the best players in America, and he fumbles the ball away late game. I'm sure he's not happy with himself, but everybody's going to hit adversity. Everybody's going to struggle at some point. It really is what you do with it. And in my case, I knew I was good enough, and I knew essentially there was a point in the fall where I knew I was going to make the team. And it was probably a week or two before tryouts. I was probably in the best shape of anybody on the whole roster. I could shoot just as good as anybody else, and the ball handling was fine. But I knew the plays. I knew what to do, and I knew how to guard certain people. So there was a point like a week or two before tryouts where I knew I was going to make the team, which was advantageous to me going into tryouts because it's just play with house money. I'm just going to play my ass off and kind of figure it out. But once I did make the team, it's like it really was, how am I going to get on this floor? Because I know I deserve it and I know I'm good enough. And it was dealing with the coach not putting me in, just simply not putting me in. Playing the other guys who he recruited above, which again is understandable because it's college and you recruit kids to play certain positions. And as a coach, if you recruit a kid, you kind of have to prove your point, I guess, to a sense. But also dealing with failure, dealing with having bad days in practice or getting into the game and making a mistake. It's like, oh, now the walk-on made a mistake. It's kind of double or triple if a starter who has been recruited were to make a mistake. So just that ultimate pursuit of what I was trying to get at in getting on the floor, and then ultimately, being a 2-year captain after that, and being able to say that I had played college basketball was probably one of the coolest things that I've ever done. And I looking back on it, I wish I had done more at this point. And that's something that I guess kids can just keep pursuing, keep pushing through. And if you aren't think you're doing enough, keep working on it. And if you don't think it's good enough, it probably is. You just haven't had that success yet.
Yep. And another tip, just again, for parents and for players, it's never personal. I don't think that's a hard thing. That's the hardest thing for me to communicate with my players. But I want so much to communicate it effectively, to say that playing time is not personal with me. And I don't think it is with most coaches. It's not a personal thing. Making the team is definitely not a personal thing. That as a coach, you respect all the work that's gone in. Now, if you have a kid who hasn't worked, you're going to cut them. It's just there's a lot less explaining for me in those situations. The meeting's a lot shorter in terms of that meeting, that terrible meeting that you have to have when you are going to cut a player. It's a lot shorter for a kid who hasn't shown up all off season, but it's never personal. I take no pleasure in doing it. I take no pleasure in a player getting beat out for playing time. You want those guys to be successful. So that's hard in the moment to understand. Players equate playing time. Players equate making a team, a roster, as being personal so many times. So it's important that coaches out there, you're developing relationships with your players so that they understand there is a distinct difference between those two things. A couple of little minor tips I just wanted to bring up. At the high school level, you are going to have to adjust with a higher level of intensity from your coach. You're going to get yelled at. That's a new experience for some players. You're going to get yelled at. That's one. Parents, when you go to games, your kid might get yelled at. That's okay, right? It's not abusive. Can it be? Some coaches really do a poor job, and maybe it can, but for the most part, no, it's not. It's a higher level of intensity. And the other minor tip that just drives me crazy, and I know I mentioned this to you before as well, don't plan vacations. There's no taking a week off, and there's no taking days off. Parents should expect their kids to make the team. And if your kid does make the team, you should fully expect to have practice 5 to 6 days a week, depending on your team's schedule, with games mixed in. You're going to do basketball 6 out of 7 days. You cannot go away for a weekend, for a wedding. You're not going away for a week to Florida to just get away. This is not travel basketball where it's okay to miss. It's not okay to miss. You're putting your son or daughter way behind with that coach. Many coaches just take the kids off the team if you do that. We do. As a sophomore, junior, or senior. As freshmen, we're more forgiving. They may have made those plans, but we really try to emphasize to them that you should not be taking vacations or getting away. It's a different level of basketball. Don't put your kids behind the 8 ball. Try to understand this before you get into that spot, and then, man, it's really hard for your son or daughter to come back if you try to take a week off of the season.
Basketball is that sport where it has a ton of holiday vacation, right? Thanksgiving, Christmas break, and then most schools will have some sort of winter break or long weekend in February. Do not take that.
No, if your son or daughter plays basketball, you're not taking them skiing during the season. Not doing it. Skiing's not happening. Don't even plan on it. Mm-hmm. And even on the day off, how are you going to explain that? Tell me how you explain it to the coach when you show up and they broke their leg or got hurt. Well, what happened? We went skiing yesterday. Oh, no big deal. We got a state qualifier tomorrow. You're supposed to be resting. That's what the day off is for. It's not for. It's such a hard thing. It's family time. It might be something you love to do. My family loves to ski other than me. They tried to take me one time. I stayed on the kiddie slope, and I did 8 hours or so, full day. Did a lesson and everything. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I kept falling. I thought I got okay at it. My wife took me up to a decent site. I don't even know if this is even a decent site. It was literally the first stop past the bunny slopes. Nice. And I took the hardest fall. And I was so nervous that I was going to take out everybody around me. And I couldn't get the ski back on. What a horrific. But imagine if I was doing that during the season. Right. I'm taking a big chance. So you do have to understand that there are some differences at the high school level. If you're a parent, and the worst thing you could do as a parent is make your child's life harder with the coach on the team. Don't make it harder. Just make it as easy as possible. Just get the schedule, and there are no exceptions. Be there early. Be ready to pick up on time. Don't miss any days.
Simple as that. Every shoe style.
It's not that hard.
That's it from the coach right there. A lot of good stuff in this episode. Tryout preparation, preparing for basketball season, whether you're a parent, whether you're a player. Getting cut, what happens if you get cut, what to say as a parent if you get cut. Players have to be extra prepared. It comes prior to the season, as we talked about in the fall. And ultimately all that work that you do in the summer, in the off season, comes to fruition and at tryouts, and hopefully everybody out there makes their teams. And definitely send us some comments if you like certain parts of the episode or some things that we should have covered or that you'd like to hear us cover. We'd love to hear from you guys. So this is Locked In Basketball, your source for everything basketball. Once again, my name is Nick DeFeo. This is Jason Shea, the coach, getting started here in a couple weeks. Basketball season's right around the corner. Make sure you are prepared for tryouts. Coach, nice job.